Hi everyone, welcome back to the second video in my video series. Before diving into the realm of organic marketing techniques, it's important to provide context for what it means to be certified organic. Recognizing the history of organic gives important context before moving forward with this video series. I will discuss the current standards first, and then go back in time while transitioning to modern day in chronological order to describe a brief history of organics. Then I will discuss the modern certification and standards process. Does that make sense? Let's dive in. When dealing with certified organic, it's always important to look at the specific source from the USDA. For today's video, we'll be referencing this photo from the USDA's website regarding the National Organic Program. The National Organic Program, commonly referred to as the NOP, is part of the USDA's Agricultural Marketing Service. They have regulatory oversight responsibilities over the USDA organic standards and the accreditation process, which involves organic certifying agents. The NOP also has the authority to take appropriate legal action to enforce the organic standards and thus protect the integrity of the USDA organic standards. To meet this responsibility, the NOP team conducts the following activities: supports the NOSB, a federal advisory committee. They set the standards for organically produced agricultural products. They accredit and oversee a network of third-party certifiers who certify the businesses. They investigate claims. They facilitate open markets. They administer organic certifications, and they engage stakeholders through communication, outreach, and training programs. Moving down the infographic, we can see that organic is a labeling term for food or other agricultural products that have been produced using cultural, biological, and mechanical practices that support the cycling of on-farm resources, promoting ecological balance, and conserving biodiversity in accordance with the USDA organic regulations. This means that organic operations must maintain or enhance water quality while also conserving wetlands, woodlands, and wildlife. Synthetic fertilizers, sewage sludge, irradiation, and genetic engineering may not be used on these farms. Again, just to reiterate, the organic label is the only regulated food label for organic food in the US. Terms like natural, clean, healthy, sustainable, hormone-free, antibiotic-free, free-range, free from, and pasture-raised are all unregulated terms. Some other things of note are the different definitions on screen. For a 100% organic label, all ingredients and processing aids must be certified organic. These foods may use the USDA organic seal as well as a 100% organic claim. Organic is all agricultural ingredients must be certified organic, but product can contain up to 5% non-organic content. These foods may use the USDA organic seal. Made with organic ingredients must contain at least 70% certified organic ingredients. The remaining 30% not required to be certified organic, but may not be produced using excluded methods. These foods may not use the USDA organic seal. Specific organic ingredients means contains less than 70% certified organic ingredients, may list certified organic ingredients as organic in the ingredient list. These foods may not use the USDA organic seal, however. Now that we have that down, let's go into the history of organics. For this next portion, I'm going to use the source, a brief overview of the history and philosophy of organic agriculture, written by George Cooper. In his chapter, Origins of Organic Agriculture, he gives some great context to the history of organics. Quote, as a concept and ideal, organic agriculture began in the early part of the 20th 20th century, primarily in Europe, but also in the United States. The pioneers of the early organic movement were motivated by a desire to reverse the perennial problems of agriculture. This included erosion, soil depletion, decline of crop varieties, low quality food and livestock feed, and rural poverty. They embraced the holistic notion that the health of a nation built on agriculture is dependent on the long term vitality of its soil. The soil's health and vitality were believed to be embodied in its biology and in the organic soil fraction called humus. Thus, a soil management strategy called humus farming emerged, which employed traditional farming practices that not only conserved but also regenerated the soil. These practices, drawn from mainly stable European and Asian models, included managing crop residues, applying animal manures, composting, green manuring, planting perennial forages in rotation with other crops, and adding lime and other natural rock dust to manage pH and manure crops and cropping sequences. Additionally, since the strategy revolved around soil building to nourish crops, like feed the soil, it became a humus farming mantra. Feeding the soil meant feeding the soil food web. The soil food web is the living fraction of the soil, composed of bacteria, fungi, earthworms, insects, and a host of other organisms that digest organic matter and meter nutrition to crop plants. This is seen in the figure shown on screen now. The figure on screen is a perfect representation of some of the feelings of these early organic farmers in the 20th century. As you can see in the top right, organic matter from crop residues, manure, green manure, mulch, compost, and natural fertilizers was put into the soil food web, and therefore plants could take up available nutrients. This specific strategy of feeding the soil actually contrasts with the then emerging strategy of using soluble fertilizers which bypass the soil food web to fertilize plants directly. Humus followers typically avoided or used very few synthetic fertilizers. Again, we see this early idea of organic farming practices. Later in this quote, you can see that humus farmers felt that soluble fertilizers led to imbalanced plant nutrition and luxury consumption, which reduced food and feed quality. Many also believe that many synthetic fertilizers actually harm the soil biology, either killing organisms or upsetting the natural balance. They also saw this danger in the use of pesticides and chose to use few, if any, of those. Additionally, Krieger mentions that the belief that organic food is healthier than conventional fare is a foundational belief of organic farming that continues to drive the market today. Surveys continue to show that healthfulness is the main reasons that consumers buy organic food. So this ties in to the marketing techniques that we will speak about later. Before moving forward in the history of organics, it's important to recognize why we could have potentially moved away from these ecological principles in farming. One of my professors, Bill Tracy, from Horticulture 367, argues that industrial agriculture enabled by fossil fuel inputs allowed us to ignore these ecological principles that people previously held within the farming operational sector. Two examples include the internal combustion engine circa 1880 and the Haber-Bosch process in 1909, which allowed us to make ammonia fertilizers. With these new inventions, he argues, farmers were able to ignore ecological principles. However, we're now going to discuss some of these individuals and organizations who pushed back against these popular ideologies that began to emerge within the 20th century. Just to give some evidence to these increases in practices which move away from the ecological principles we previously held, here are two charts showcasing the 20th century applications of synthetic pesticides and fertilizers. As you can see, there's an exponential growth of these additions to farming systems. Still, however, we see some individuals who pushed back against these practices of pesticides and fertilizer applications. One quote that stands out to me from Lady E. Balfour, a farmer, educator, and organic movement pioneer, is bolded below on the slide. One reason is the enormous demands on the world's non renewable resources of energy, made by our Western lifestyle in general and modern farming techniques in particular. Another is that modern methods are putting strains on the biota, which is causing it to collapse. Another industrial age thinker is Sir Albert Howard, who pointed out the detrimental impacts of the loss of fertility that we see from the vast increases in crop and animal productions during the early 1900s. Additionally, J.J. Rodale, an American author, points that the present agricultural practices in 1954 were leading us downhill. Lord Northbourne pointed out, as you can see in the last sentence, that imported chemicals can by no means make up for a loss of biological self-sufficiency. And then there's Aldo Leopold, a professor of wildlife ecology from UW-Madison. As he says, the destruction of soil is the most fundamental kind of economic loss which the human race can suffer. And last but certainly not least is Rachel Carson, who wrote the book Silent Spring in 1962, exposing the dangers of DDT and pesticide use in general. With the onset of the 1970s and a growing industrial agricultural system, with notions like get big or get out, there were still farmer activists who were pushing for organic principles. These individuals came together to form organizations that were trying to build the organic infrastructure. For my video specifically, I will be focusing on iFoam, which was founded in 1972. iFoam, or the International Federation of Organic Agriculture Movements, was founded in 1972. It's an Organics International membership-based organization working to bring true sustainability to agriculture across the globe. They have 4 different principles, including the principle of health, the principle of ecology, of fairness, and of care. Even though the 1970s and 80s was the wild, wild west of organics, people were still coming together to push back against potentially harmful farming practices that we had previously seen arise following World War II. More specifically, we see the National Organic Standards Board being created, also known as the NOSB. We spoke about them a little bit previously, however, I'd like to go a little bit more in depth on them. The NOSB advises the Secretary of Agriculture in setting the standards for the NOP program. The NOSB consists of 4 farmers, 2 handlers and processors, 1 retailer, 1 scientist, 3 consumers / public interest advocates, 3 environmentalists, and a certifying agent. USDA appoints the NOSB members. Ultimately, they advise the USDA on which inputs should be allowed or prohibited. For example, the NOSB must also review each substance on the NOP list every 5 years to confirm that it continues to meet all required criteria set forth in the OFPA. This is referred to as the Sunset Review. They also meet twice per year in a public forum to discuss the issues and vote on their final recommendations. All these meetings are free and open to the public. As with anything, however, there is always ongoing tensions between the USDA and NOSB and NOSB and organic farmers and activists. For example, there's controversy over the approved materials, hydroponics, things like the seed industry and gene editing, and a myriad of other topics which are still being debated every single year at these conferences and meetings. Now that we've looked at the history of organics and also identified what it specifically means to be certified organic, let's dive into the certification process. Real quick, the certification process looks like this. You must transition to organic production, which takes 36 months. You submit the application to an agency with an organic system plan. The agency reviews the application. Then the organic inspector comes on the farm to certify things. The agency reviews this certifier's report, and the agency ultimately certifies the producer. Additionally, this is something that happens annually in order to be recertified as USDA organic. Pause this slide to look at this infographic a little bit more closely if you would like. However, due to my access to slides from a representative from MOSA, I will be able to dive into the certification process a little bit deeper for you guys. On the right of this figure, you can kind of see the framework that ensures organic integrity. The USDA NOP accredits certifying agents, and then those certifying agents certify the organic operations. Companies like MOSA are an example of this. MOSA promotes organic integrity through practical, reliable, and friendly certification services. As MOSA explains on their website, they are the partner in organic producers' success. The rapidly growing organic market is a great opportunity for farmers, food processors, handlers, restaurants, and food retailers. With the higher consumer demand of organic products, there needs to be certifier companies and certifier individuals who are coming to these farms to ensure that things are done properly. And that is what MOSA does. A big question with organics is always whether to certify or not. If you sell over $5,000 worth of organic products and want to use the word organic on products, promotions, and signage, and use the organic seal, you must be certified. Even though we think of organics as things that are solely focused on crops, you can be certified organic in crops, handling, and livestock. As mentioned previously, there is a transition period for organics. Harvested crops intended to be sold, labeled, or represented as organic must have had no prohibited substances applied for a period of 36 months immediately preceding harvest of the crop. You can only use allowable materials found on the USDA National List of Allowed and Prohibited Substances. It's always a good idea to confirm all materials with your certifier before use to be sure it's allowable for your organic production. The approval of any input for organic use is at the discretion of the certifier. An important thing to note here is that during those 36 months, you still must be acting as if you're organic, although you are not getting that price premium of the USDA certified organic label. This is one of the downsides of switching to organics. Despite this, however, I argue that the price premiums that will ultimately come with organics, as well as the sustainable practices that you will be required to implement, will ultimately be more beneficial in the long run for farming operations. As touched upon earlier, here is the certification process. When creating your application, here's some things that you must include: your organic system plan, your farm map, field histories, current year field plans, planned materials, and planned crops. These resources will aid your organic certifier in figuring out the history of your farming operation and how you plan on to stay within the organic certification as you continue. In addition to your organic application and plan, your annual inspection must go well. In order to remain certified, your annual inspections must go well and the organic certifier must not find any prohibited use of substances or any prohibited actions under the USDA organic label. Here's a list of all the things that you need for an organic inspection each year. After all of this work, you go to a final review in order to see whether you can be certified organic. After becoming certified organic, if you intend on maintaining that status, you must understand the non-compliances and major non-compliances. A non-compliance has room for improvement and changes. However, a major non-compliance like forgery, cover-up, or fraud can get you immediately banned from the USDA certified list. That concludes my video on the history of organics, what it means to be organic, and the certification process of such. Although this may be an intimidating process for some farmers, I argue that this long and strenuous process is worth it due to the price premiums and the ability to change your farming practices to a more sustainable route for the future of agriculture. Please stay tuned for my next set of videos, which will dive a little bit more specifically into the organic marketing techniques that are used. Thank you.